It's a P5 for now. Norris did at 32.2. Still waiting for Verstappen. Piastri. Geoff and Boslow.
How far are we off?
8 tenths. Two tenths in the first sector and 3 tenths the second and third sector.
Where do we lose our time? What position are we?
P8. Finish P8. Turn 1. Apex speed of turn 8. And turn 20 was on the main one.
How long can a 7-time world champion last when his car limits him at every corner? What does Hamilton's radio in Austin reveal to us about the true state of Ferrari in 2025? Stay, because what you will hear, even if it is not public, changes everything. Austin doesn't forgive mistakes. It is a circuit that amplifies the strengths of the most polished teams, but also exposes the most hidden weaknesses of those that arrive without real solutions. Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari landed at the Circuit of the Americas carrying the weight of a 2025 season that was already beginning to crumble. Not only because of the lack of results, but because of something much more serious. A profound disconnection between the car and its ability to adapt to the driver. Since the beginning of the weekend, the symptoms were clear. Ferrari was presented in Texas without bringing relevant updates. There were no new parts, no aerodynamic solutions or structural adjustments that made a real technical difference. The approach was different. Refine the execution with what they already had. That decision, seemingly strategic, was actually a silent admission that there was nothing more to offer. And in Formula One, that is equivalent to going to war with a dull sword. In the only free practice session, Hamilton finished 8th, almost 7 tenths behind Lando Norris's McLaren. At that point, it was clear that the SF25 was not up to the demands of the layout. But the most telling thing happened during sprint qualifying. SQ1 was, paradoxically, the most hopeful moment of the weekend for Hamilton. With the mandatory medium tire, he showed an initial pace that put him above even Max Verstappen. It was just a flash, a momentary illusion that evaporated as the minutes passed. As the qualifying phases progressed, the car began to show its true face, that of an unpredictable, unstable platform with such a narrow margin of maneuver that any slight misalignment would throw it out of the competitive rhythm. In SQ2, Hamilton was close to elimination. He only advanced to SQ3 by 0.06 of a second, benefiting from an error by Antonelli in turn 11. That classification at the limit was more than an anecdote. It was the exact portrait of Ferrari's state. There is no control. There is no margin. There is no technical support for a driver who, with all his talent, continues to fight more with the car than with his rivals. When the SQ3 finally arrived, with soft tires available, the outlook did not improve. Hamilton closed the session with a time of 1 minute and 33.035 seconds. More than 9 tenths behind Verstappen. His teammate, Charles Leclerc, finished 10th, just 69 thousandths behind. Alex Albon slipped between them with a Williams, which is a technical humiliation disguised as an anecdote. Because when a midfield team is sandwiched between two Ferraris, it's no longer just a bad day. It's a sign that the entire project is faltering. And this is where the real emotional fracture occurs. Not because of the result itself, but because Hamilton came to Ferrari looking for redemption, not resignation. In his mind, this project represented a new era, a cycle of personal revenge after years of frustration with Mercedes. But what he found is a car that cannot even ensure consistency between sessions. A car incapable of transforming potential into results, no matter the talent that drives it. The SF25 isn't just slow. It is an unbalanced car, unable to work consistently in different temperature windows. It suffers with crosswinds, with mass transfer in fast corners, and, above all, with the response of the front axle in technical sections. This means that the pilot has to force reactive driving, always correcting, always surviving. And for someone like Hamilton, who builds his pace on confidence and precision under braking, this is a condemnation. The classification in Austin was the latest symptom of a deeper ailment. It is not a question of a bad lap, nor of a wrong choice of tires. It is the reflection of a technical structure that has not been able to offer its new driver a single weekend where the car is a tool and not an obstacle. And the most worrying thing is that the team knows it but does not have, at least for now, the ability to reverse it. This block does not just talk about a mediocre classification. It speaks of the silent tension between the expectation of a champion and the helplessness of a team that cannot live up to him. And when that conflict occurs in a place as technical and unforgiving as Austin, the result can be nothing but frustration. Not only what you hear on the radio, but what you breathe in every corner in which the car simply does not respond. For years, Lewis Hamilton was the epitome of emotional control on radio. His tone, his words, even his pauses, were as calculated as his curved lines. But at Ferrari something has changed. It's not that he's lost his composure. It's that he has found a new limit. One that does not depend on your talent, nor your experience, nor even your will. It depends on the car. And when that happens, the radio becomes an escape valve. Not for the pilot, but for the human being behind the helmet. In Austin, after finishing 8th in the sprint standings, there were no shouts or open reproaches. There were no team scandals. What there was something more disturbing. A tense silence interrupted by dry, functional, emotionless phrases. Hamilton's radio doesn't need explosions to tell us something is wrong. Enough with the tone. Enough with what he doesn't say. In previous seasons, especially in his last years with Mercedes, Hamilton had already shown discomfort through his messages on the track. But it was a different kind of discomfort. Back then, it was either questionable strategies or lack of on-time rhythm. Now, with Ferrari, the frustration is structural. It's not that the car isn't good one day. It hasn't been any weekend. And that wear and tear accumulates. The communication pattern with his track engineer, Riccardo Adami, makes it clear. Hamilton asks for clarity, not explanations. It demands precision, not comfort. Just give me the times. Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3. It is an instruction, not a conversation. Because in his mind, the time for justifying mistakes has passed. Now all that remains is to manage damage. And it's not a matter of ego. It's a matter of efficiency. Hamilton knows that every radio exchange is an opportunity to adjust, correct, decide. But when the car doesn't respond, what should be a tactical tool becomes a useless repetition of data that doesn't matter. Because you cannot build strategy on a defective foundation. The car does not allow you to plan. Just react. In that context, Austin represents a turning point. Not because it was his worst result, he has had worse in 2025, but because it was a confirmation. Confirmation that the SF25 is nowhere near competitive. Not even in long runs. Not even in classification. Not even with soft rubber. Not even with stockings. Not even with the talent of a driver like Hamilton. And that breaking point is not heard in a sentence. It is detected in the way the pilot stops talking. How it gets shorter and shorter. More direct. Drier. It's not that I have stopped believing in the team. It's just that he has stopped expecting miracles. And when that happens, all that's left is pragmatism. A surgical coldness that, far from being a virtue, reveals the detachment that is beginning to establish between the pilot and the structure that surrounds him. In interviews after sprint qualifying, Hamilton was clear. There is no improvement. Ferrari didn't bring anything new to Texas. There are no pieces, there is no evolution. Just an attempt to optimize a car that has already shown its ceiling, and that ceiling is dangerously low for the aspirations of a 7-time champion. That explains why his radio messages do not point to human errors, but to technical limits. No complaints about pit stops. There are no criticisms of the management. Just recognition of a reality. The single-seater is not enough. And the most shocking thing is not that Hamilton says it. It's how he says it. No drama. No scandal. With the elegant resignation of someone who has already gone through all the phases of the competitive duel. Because in the end, when the car doesn't respond and the season slips through our fingers, frustration is no longer shouted. It is digested in silence. And it is transmitted in every radio message, no matter how brief. In Austin, that disconnection was brutal. Not because the car broke down or failed mechanically, but because it simply wasn't up to the challenge. I had no rhythm. I had no balance. He had no weapons. And for a driver like Hamilton, that is worse than a one-time mistake. It is a sentence. Because he knows that no matter how much he executes perfectly, no matter how much he maximizes each sector, the car is going to sell him. And that kind of helplessness is not forgotten. He stays. It seeps into the way he walks in the paddock, in the way he responds in interviews, and how he speaks on the radio. Or worse yet, when you decide not to speak. And this is where a narrative window opens that deserves to be explored. If Ferrari doesn't react, what will be Hamilton's next move? Will you continue betting on the patient construction of a team that does not fully respond? Or will we begin to see signs of distancing, of silent rupture, as has happened so many times in the history of this sport? It is still early to say. But if this weekend in Austin taught us anything, it's that time is running out. That every radio message, every 10th lost in qualifying, every duel lost against theoretically inferior cars, is a warning sign. Not only for Ferrari, also for all of us as viewers who still dream of seeing Hamilton fighting for the top. Not as an honorable veteran, but as the relentless competitor he has always been. The question is no longer whether Hamilton can perform. That has never been in doubt. The question is whether Ferrari can accompany him. If you can be at his level. If you can at least give him a worthy tool to compete with. Because if the answer is still no, then what follows is not a new attempt. What follows is a decision. Let me know what you think of all this.